On March 27, 2023, a gunman entered the Covenant Christian School in Nashville, Tennessee. 27-year-old Audrey Elizabeth Hale, who identified as Aiden Hale, opened fire and shot to death 3 children and 3 teachers before Hale was killed by Metropolitan Police. It was a crime that shocked the nation. But astonishingly, authorities did everything they could to cover up the manifesto left behind by the shooter until now. Today, the FBI released the full manifesto, and now we know why they tried so desperately to bury it. Recently, Rutgers University released the shocking results of a survey on the growing support for political violence among the left. Overall, 31% of respondents in the survey felt that killing Elon Musk was at least somewhat justified, while another 38% felt the same way about President Trump. But the real shock came when the participants were broken down in terms of their political partisan leanings. 55%, a majority of left-leaning respondents, said it would be at least somewhat justifiable to assassinate President Trump, and 60% of self-identified leftists believe vandalizing and destroying Teslas was justifiable as well. The survey was so heinous that Sean Hannity devoted an entire hour last night to a special segment on the rise of the radical left and their epidemic of far-left violence in our nation. One of the most heinous examples of this far-left penchant for violence was the school shooting in Nashville, a shooting that happened on the very same week that trans activists had scheduled a mass protest they called a day of vengeance against the supposed intolerance against trans people, and they specifically targeted the city of Nashville. Now, while the two events were not formally linked, that overlap alone, you would think, would be enough for the legacy media to make a connection, at least however loosely, between the shootings and left-wing activism. But no. Instead, the legacy media actually blamed conservatives for the shooting. NBC News and New York Times contributor Benjamin Ryan, in a tweet that he ended up deleting, suggested that Nashville was chosen by the shooter because Nashville is the home to the Daily Wire, a hub, as he put it, of anti-trans activity. And he was hardly alone. Other leftist outlets were busy concocting their own anti-conservative spin. Here's ABC's Terry Moran and his take on what the shooting was really all about.
Police chief also said that the shooter has been identified as 28-year-old female Audrey Hale. He said she's a former student of the school and confirmed that Audrey Hale was identified herself as a transgender person. State of Tennessee earlier this month passed and the governor signed a bill that banned transgender medical care for minors, as well as a law that prohibited adult entertainment, including male and female impersonators, after a series of drag show controversies in that state.
Now, of course, that legislation signed into law in Tennessee had to do with underage children. Audrey Hale was nearly 30 years old. But subtly blaming conservative Christians for the shooting was only half of it. The worst was yet to come. Gang, I'll be the first to admit that bad habits can be a struggle for anyone, myself included. When I hear about a good solution to solving a bad habit I know many people deal with, I can't wait to share it with my audience. What if I told you that there was an enjoyable and fun alternative to one of the most prevalent bad habits in our society? Well, that's where Fume comes in. This new flavored air device is quickly becoming the new alternative to those old choices. Whether you're helping someone build better habits or just want to give them something fun and relaxing, Fume makes an awesome gift for everyone. It's an award-winning flavored air device with phenomenal flavor, and it's a guilt-free option with non-toxic flavors like crisp mint and orange vanilla. It's like having your favorite sweets and knowing you could feel good about it. The best part about fume is that it fills a void when you're trying to kick those nasty habits, and it's one more way that courageous conservatives can fight against the left and their agenda to keep Americans down. You should seriously give fume a try. They conduct third-party studies, they have amazing quality control of their products, and they're developed with real doctors right here in the USA. Spring is right around the corner, so head to tryfume.com/Steve Turley and use code Steve Turley, all one word, to get a free fume topper when you order a journey pack. Again, tryfume.com/Steve Turley. Just scan the QR code on the screen to grab yours now. Reports soon surfaced that Hale left behind an extensive manifesto explaining the twisted rationale behind the shootings, but the Biden Justice Department refused to release it to the public. In fact, one federal judge actually cited copyright law to block its release. When Steven Crowder obtained leaked portions from the manifesto, Facebook censored it. Literally minutes after the manifesto was leaked, Facebook took the post down for violating its terms of service. But not before the whole world saw 3 pages from the manifesto describing Hale's virulent racism towards whites and her hatred of Christians. But now, as of today, we know why our woke oligarchy did everything they possibly could to hide the manifesto. And it's even worse than we thought. FBI Director Kash Patel just released over 1,000 pages of the trans school shooters' writings and manifesto to Megyn Kelly in Congress. And what's inside explains precisely why authorities did everything they could bury it under the Biden administration. The full 1,000-page manifesto and writings are reportedly saturated with the most vile, anti-Christian, anti-white, anti-American, and anti-heteronormative rhetoric imaginable. Again, to make matters worse, the shooter reportedly abandoned targeting the public school where she was originally bullied so as not to appear racist. Instead, she intentionally targeted a Christian school made up of the race and the religion that this shooter repeatedly claimed to want to kill. Now, obviously, this was all there for the legacy media to report on. Since that fateful day on March 27th, a few years back, the evidence clearly revealed that this was a violent, murderous, left-wing activist. But what makes what the legacy media did so outrageous is that they didn't just try to cover it up. No, they projected. They actually blamed the shooting on the worldview, the conservative traditionalist worldview of the victims. Now, yesterday we talked extensively about that report that came out from Rutgers that showed that a majority of leftists actually support murderous violence against their political enemies. And I gave a deep dive on why the ideological left is inherently violent. You'll definitely want to check that video out. But today what I want to talk about is why the left and their mouthpieces in the legacy media are so prone to blame conservatives for left-on-right violence. Why did the media take this occasion to blame the killings of this self-identified trans shooter on transphobia? Well, the answer fits in very much with what we talked about on yesterday's video. We noted that cultural anthropologists have found that hysterical violent behavior is often chalked up to outside forces. It's chalked up to people either responding to or being possessed by demonic forces. That's very key to understand what I think is really going on here with the legacy media. Violence is either a response to something wicked and demonic, or it's being perpetrated as an expression on behalf of the wicked or the demonic. Now, we could take that to the next level here. Again, these same cultural anthropologists have long recognized that mass hysteria and violence is often, in a number of cultures, is often chalked up to spiritual and malignant attack. It's literally interpreted as a form of possession. So a normally sedate and ordinary person can be roused to extreme acts of violence by virtue of spiritual and demonic possession. So the key here is that this epidemic of violence is interpreted as not being the fault of the perpetrators, but rather the fault of malignant forces outside of their control. These violent, hysterical people are being possessed through no fault of their own. And so what's so key here is that such interpretations of violence and hysteria generally involve the absence of any social stigma. In other words, violently hysterical people are often not blamed for their violence in a number of cultures. Violently hysterical people are often not blamed for their violence. In fact, they're often defended in the midst of their violent hysteria. Again, we see this cross-culturally with myriads of examples. They're not stigmatized because their symptoms are seen as involuntary. They're not acting that way because they want to. They're acting that way because they're being provoked. They're being forced to by these malevolent spirits outside of their control. So again, closing the loop here with what we talked about yesterday, in a liberal-infested culture like ours, that evil, those malignant forces are racism, sexism, and most especially transphobia. Transphobia, for our left-wing activists disguised as journalists in our legacy media, transphobia is a malignant force. It's literally demonic. And demonic malignant forces compel otherwise stable and ordinary people to do horrifically violent things. Now, you'll notice, like we talked about in yesterday's video, this only works in one direction. When leftists act out violently, it's because they're being possessed by a malignant spirit of racism, sexism, transphobia. When rightists act out violently, it's because they have aligned themselves with those malignant forces. That's the key distinction. Leftist violence is always interpreted within a liberal worldview as fighting against evil, whereas rightist violence in a liberal worldview is always interpreted as an expression of that evil. So as it turns out, we're learning a lot about how the radical left views the world this week. With that Rutgers study and now the release of the full Manifesto, we're getting a rather strong sense of just how far gone the woke left really is. Fortunately, with the rise of a new American golden age, their days in power look to be coming to an end. Their days of judging others for their own sins are indeed over. Hey there, Turley Talker. You know what? I'd love to hear from you. That's why I'm launching the Dr. Steve Hotline, where you can call in, leave a question, and maybe even hear your own voice featured on an upcoming episode of the show. Whether it's about the latest political shakeup or cultural trends or how we keep pushing forward in this new conservative age, I want to know what's on your mind. Call me at 717-844-5984. Just leave your question. I'll be checking in every single week to answer as many as I can. Again, that's 717-844-5984. Your chance to be a part of the conversation. One more time, 717-844-5984. Give me a call and let's talk.